what does a person do if they find themselves? I found myself in this situation. I had overstayed my visa, and I was flying standby. And say, for instance, I found myself in that situation here, and I had to actually stay in America. What would be the process of a person that's here illegally taking the proper steps to get legal status?
Well, of course, my first recommendation would be make an appointment to see an attorney as soon as possible, an experienced immigration attorney, to see if you were eligible for one of the procedural mechanisms that could get you a what's commonly referred to as a green card, which gives permanent resident status or the right to permanently work and live in the United States. And the most common ways that that happens are typically if a family member or an employer is willing to sponsor an individual. And that process can be a very lengthy process, but generally speaking, you can do all of that stateside, meaning you wouldn't have to leave the country for consular processing, and you could file your petitions or applications here and get that process started.
Okay, very nice. And so what would that process look like from the standpoint of someone, if they wanted to get some advice, what would that cost them? What would they have to do? How does that process get started with an immigration attorney?
That is going to vary a lot depending on what your option is, but you know, the most common thing we probably see is if a person has a spouse who's a U.S. citizen, for example, then they will file their first petition, and they will be able to also file an application to adjust status at the same time, which makes the process a little bit faster.
Sure.
While that processing is pending, they're typically going to get a notice to appear for an interview where they'll have to do fingerprinting, background check, those types of things. They will then often get a temporary work authorization, and then wait for the final step, which would be an interview. That process used to take about 6 months to a year. Now we're seeing it's taking really anywhere from a year to 2 years, depending on which field office they would be applying through. And that's going to depend on where you live, essentially. And the cost of attorney's fees, of course, is going to depend on the attorney, and the filing fees can be costly as well. But you know, the filing fees alone for that process are going to range probably around $1,500.